Hello, Shadowrek here. Today's video is Shadowrek Presents Hero Talents. Today I'm going to be going over the hero talents for Havoc Demon Hunter. I have previously already made a video going over the Demon Hunter class tree, as well as the Havoc spec tree, and that will be linked in the description below, as well as this video will be linked in their descriptions. This one's going to cover Aldrachi Reaver, as well as Fel-Scarred, both of our hero talent trees. So, I'm going to start with Aldrachi Reaver, as it's the most commonly played one right now. So, to start with for Aldrachi Reaver, you have Art of the Glaive. And what Art of the Glaive does is it gives us a new ability that overwrites Throw Glaive while it is up, called Reaver's Glaive. Consuming 6 soul fragments, which is just picking them up off the ground, and this is whether they're lesser or regular soul fragments, they all count. Consuming 6 of them, or casting the Hunt, converts your next Throw Glaive into a Reaver's Glaive. This will just replace the button, and you can only have one Reaver's Glaive at a time. However, you can sit on any amount of soul fragments beyond that. For example, if you build up a Hunt, and then you pick up another 6 soul fragments, you build up a Reaver's Glaive with the Hunt, you pick up 6 more soul fragments, and then you throw your Reaver's Glaive, you won't grab a second Reaver's Glaive right away, but the next time you pick up a soul, it will take 6 away from your current count, dropping you from 7, after adding 1, down to 1, and then you'll have another Reaver's Glaive in hand. And this number can go up to, I believe, 60. It's some unfeasibly high number you'll never see on Havoc Demon Hunter. So what Reaver's Glaive does is, you throw a glaive, and it does a lot more damage than Throw Glaive does, as well as it bounces to 1 additional enemy. With our Bouncing Glaives talent, that means it ricochets 3 times, it'll hit up to 4 enemies. And when you throw Reaver's Glaive, this enhances the next Chaos Strike and the next Blade Dance that you cast. Depending which one is first, which one is second, depends how they're buffed. The first one that you cast is buffed by 10% and has an effect that happens. The second one is buffed by 20%, and the effect that would happen is doubled. As for what those effects are, we have Area of the Aldrachi, and this is what happens when your Blade Dance is enhanced by Reaver's Glaive. It casts 3 additional Glaive Slashes. These aren't actual Blade Dance Glaive Slashes, they're their own, entirely separate, fully physical damage Glaive Slashes that do uncapped AoE. And if you cast it after Chaos Strike instead of first, it will do 6 instead of 3 slashes. On the other side, we have Reaver's Mark. This is the enhancement for Chaos Strike, and Reaver's Mark applies a debuff to your enemy, causing that target to take 6% increased damage from you for 20 seconds. This can stack twice, whether you apply it through Chaos Striking second and having it apply 2 stacks, or by doing 2 single stacks by casting Chaos Strike first. And these stacks fall off separately, so if you refresh the buff and you go from 6 to 12%, you'll actually have a second stack with its own timer. The first stack will fall off at its own timer, and you'll drop down to 1 stack, etc. Next, we have a choice node, and this is fully utility, really. But you can either have Vengeful Retreat be cast a second time within 3 seconds. You do need to make a macro, or else this button kind of loves to just hit itself, where it'll press it twice instantly when you hit it, because Vengeful doesn't put itself on a lockout, and it's off global cooldown. The other thing is, the second cast of Vengeful Retreat does not have any interactions with our kit. It doesn't work with Initiative, Tactical Retreat, any of Inertia, Exergy. None of those work with it. It's just the second movement global, and that's all it can really be used for. The option that we typically take is Unhindered Assault, and that's every time you press Vengeful Retreat, it resets the cooldown of Fellblade. The nice thing to this is, while we don't really need to min-max it for the Fury from Fellblade, this will take you directly back to your target if you need to hit Fellblade, and it'll always be up in case you need to use it, because Fellblade cancels the Vengeful Retreat movement. Next is Aldrachi Tactics. This makes it, as I mentioned earlier, so the second enhanced ability, as well as being twice as strong, having the 20% buff instead of 10%, doing 6 slashes or 2 stacks of Reaver's Mark instead of 3 or a single stack. It also will shatter off a soul fragment. So a lesser soul fragment will fall on the ground. Lesser soul fragments heal you for 6% of your health, and it will be 1 soul going back into Reaver's Glaive, which means even though these cost 6, they will always refund 1 as long as you use your enhanced abilities, which you always will. So they actually cost a net 5 souls, not 6. Next, we have a defensive choice node, and there's Army onto oneself, which is whenever you Fel-Blade, you gain 10% damage reduction for 5 seconds. This could be very useful in high keys and cutting edge raiding on very specific dangerous mechanics. It can be useful. The other one is Incorruptible Spirit, and this is every soul fragment you consume shields you for an additional 15% of the amount healed. This is not a significant amount, so again, a soul fragment is 6% of our health. If it's a lesser, that's increased to 6.6 from Shattered Restoration, and then you get 15% of 6.6% of your health. Typically, this is like 1 to 1.1% shield going into your health bar per soul, but it's just more HBS, where in most content it's going to provide more health overall than Blade Ward from Fel-Blade will reduce. Next is Wounded Quarry. This is really the big one that makes Aldrachi Reaver work, and it was the new one coming into this season. So, your target that has your Reaver's Mark, and I will note you can only have Reaver's Mark on one target at a time. If you try to move it, it will take it off any other target and put it on your new one. Wounded Quarry exposes weakness in the target of your Reaver's Mark, causing your physical damage to any enemy, not just to your target, but any enemy that you hit at all, will deal 20% of that damage dealt to your Reaver's Mark target. That damage is also dealt as chaos damage, which means it scales off our mastery, which, as you could see, if I turn off my talent page here and pull up my mastery, I have 87%. So with that, Chaos Brand, and other things that affect this, this typically is closer to 40% of the damage dealt is actually funneled in, and this is what gives us funnel. As well as that, sometimes it shatters a lesser soul fragment when it deals damage. This is also why always having a Reaver's markup is important to get more Reaver's Glaives, as this is a large portion of our soul generation, and also means you really want to keep uptime on a target, just so your melee swings are proccing Wounded Quarry, because if you do no physical damage in a given second, it won't proc and won't have a chance to give you that soul fragment. Next we have Incisive Blade. This is a boring passive that just makes Chaos Strike do 10% more damage. Nothing special there. Next we have another choice node, and we have 2 talents here. Keen Engagement, which makes it so when you cast Reaver's Glaive, it generates 20 Fury. And we have Preemptive Strike, which is Throw Glaive, deals 24,000 physical damage to enemies near its initial target. This doesn't hit the target that you throw the glaive at. It can rarely, but it doesn't seem that it's supposed to. It's also got a very small range. Typically, you take Keen Engagement in Raid. It's incredibly minor, but it's better than nothing. And Preemptive Strike, you actually take in Mythic Plus because it does a pretty significant amount of damage. You can see here in this last key, 1.6%, and that goes into Wounded Quarry as well. We have Warblade's Hunger, which is anytime you consume a soul fragment, it causes your next Chaos Strike to deal 47,000 additional physical damage. And this stacks up to 5 times, and all of them are consumed on your next Chaos Strike. So if you have 5 stacks, it would do 5 times the number listed there. However, this talent's also bugged, and it always gives you the base damage plus 1 soul fragment of scaling. So casting it with 1 soul fragment actually does double the damage it states. Whereas if you cast it with 5 soul fragments, it will only do 6 times the damage stated, which is triple of a single soul, just due to the bug. This also, as of this patch, makes it so that Fel-Blade consumes up to 5 nearby soul fragments. It says nearby, but this actually has a 100-yard range. It's incredibly large, and Fel-Blade will pretty much always pick up soul fragments for you. You also can't have more than 5 soul fragments out at once. Any more than that pick up to you automatically, just as they do for Vengeance. So Fellblade essentially picks up all of your soul fragments. Lastly, we have the buff that we play around for Aldrachi, which is Thrill the Fight. After consuming both your enhancements, using both the Chaos Strike and the Blade Dance, you gain Thrill the Fight. This increases your attack speed by 15% for 20 seconds, and your damage and healing by 15% for 10 seconds. The attack speed is very high uptime, you don't think about it at all, whereas the damage and healing is something that you kind of want to track and make sure you're not overwriting it to min-max that uptime. I will also note, for Reaver's Glaive, it has synergy with all of our Throw Glaive talents, except for Furious Throws. So if I type in Throw Glaive, you'll see everything that's Throw Glaive related pops up. So it'll bounce to one additional target, 4 targets will hit instead of 3. This makes it so that enemies hit are slowed by 50%. It will not give you 2 charges of Reaver's Glaive though. Accelerated Blade makes it do 60% increased damage to the first target and 30% less per each enemy hit. Furious Throws, as I mentioned, doesn't work, so it doesn't have a Fury cost, and it does not throw 2 Reaver's Glaives. With Serrated Glaive, it will do 15% more damage if the debuff is up. Soul Scar, 80% of the damage dealt by Reaver's Glaive is dealt as chaos damage. This is scaled up by mastery, so this is effectively like 150%-ish bonus damage on Reaver's Glaive. And lastly, Screaming Brutality. This one doesn't work with it either. Blade Dance will not automatically throw your Reaver's Glaive. However, even if you have Reaver's Glaive up, it will still throw glaives, even though it's not a button that you can't normally hit. So there's good synergy there where it's not like if Reaver's Glaive is up, this talent stops working, fortunately. Next, we have Fel-Scarred. So, with Fel-Scarred, the first one is going to be Demon Surge. Now, Demon Surge has 2 different effects. One is Metamorphosis now also causes Demon Blades to generate 3 additional Fury. That is our proc on Melee Swing. Instead of 7 to 12, it will proc as 10 to 15 while you're in meta, giving you more Fury generation. It also gives you more Fury generation if you are playing Demon's Bite instead of Demon Blades in Metamorphosis. And while Demon Form is active, the first cast of each empowered ability induces a Demon Surge. This causes you to explode for fire damage to nearby enemies, and it deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. So your empowered abilities in a normal I-Beam window, that is Death Sweep and Annihilation. There will be other empowered abilities that I'll get to further down in the tree. We have a Choice Node next. These are for utility. Wave of Debilitation, which is Chaos Nova, our AoE stun, slows enemies by 60%, and reduces attack speed and cast speed of enemies by 15% for 5 seconds after the stun fades. This only works if the stun actually hits, and when the stun falls off, they'll be slowed, and their attack and casting speed are slowed. This is the talent I typically recommend for Mythic Plus just because it has some value to your group and to your tank, because they'll get autoed less and cast will be slower, whereas the other one's just movement speed, which we really don't need, but it's 1% movement speed per 10 Fury you are currently sitting on. So maximum of 17% as Fel-Scarred. We have Focused Hatred. This causes Demon Surge to deal 50% increased damage when it strikes a single target, and each additional target reduces that bonus by 10%. So if you have 2 targets, we'll do 40% instead of 50% bonus damage. Next is our Defensive Choice Node, and typically we always take the first one, Set Fire to the Pain, and this is 5% of all non-fire damage taken is instead taken as fire damage over 6 seconds. Some mechanics will not proc the damage over time, but are still reduced by 5%. So in some cases, you don't even end up taking the damage, but because of our leech, taking the damage in a staggered form is always a lot safer, and this is just a net benefit. Also, any fire damage that you take is reduced by 10% flat. You just take 10% less damage. The other choice node is 2% leech, and an additional 2% while meta is active, so instead of 10 and 20 from soul running, you'd be at 12 and 24%. X is Burning Blades, and this causes Chaos Strike, Rogue Glaive, and your auto attacks to deal an additional 50% damage as fire damage over 6 seconds. This doesn't scale with Mastery, even though it used to in Season 1. However, Chaos Strike does scale with Mastery, so you still have Mastery scaling where buffing Chaos Strike will buff Burning Blades. Um, this does a good amount of damage, given over like a raid boss or a key, uh, and it makes Chaos Strike pretty powerful. Next, we have Violent Transformation, and this is a lot like Chaotic Transformation in our Havoc tree. That's the one that resets the cooldown of Blade Dance and I-Beam. Violent Transformation resets the cooldown of Sigil of Flame and Immolation Aura, and that includes if you run a fire inside, it will refund both charges. So that's why you want to use all your Immolation Auras as Fel-Scarred before you press Metamorphosis, and then you'll get them back. We have Enduring Torment, and this is outside of demon form, so whenever you're not in demonic or metamorphosis, your Chaos Strike and Blade Dance deal 15% increased damage, whereas in meta they do 30% bonus, and your haste is increased by 5%, whereas meta is 20% haste. I will say this talent causes a weird thing where Chaos Strike and Blade Dance on Fel-Scarred are not much weaker than Annihilation and Death Sweep, because right below this, we have Monster Rising, which also gives you 8% agility while not in demon form. And that means that these abilities are doing somewhere around 22 to 23% more damage, whereas in meta it's only a 30% bonus, so it does something around 5% more. Next we have Untethered Fury, and this just takes your maximum Fury and increases it by 50. Now, base Havoc Fury is 100, but we have Unrestrained Fury that takes it to 120, and then Untethered brings it up to 170. Next, we have a choice node of Student of Suffering, which was nerfed coming into Season 2, and Flamebound. Student of Suffering is whenever you cast Sigil of Flame, it applies Student of Suffering to you, which increases Mastery by 18% and gives you 5 Fury every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. The problem is this buff is pretty small now. It used to be 21.6%, and this used to work on Demon Surge and Burning Blades, which were Mastery scaled. And it used to be 8 seconds instead of 6, so now it's way too small of a window to use, and the buff is tiny. The other one is Flamebound. This increases the Immolation Aura range by 2 yards, taking it from 8 yards to 10 yards. This also works on Rage Fire, so it will hit in the 10-yard range instead of 8. And it increases your critical strike damage bonus on Aura by 50%. This will also buff Rage Fire by 50%, as all critical strikes are buffed by 50%, and that is the damage that builds Rage Fire. As I mentioned, there's Monster Rising for the 8% agility while not in demon form. And lastly, we have Demonic Intensity. This makes it so that when you activate Metamorphosis, which is actually casting your Metamorphosis cooldown, it empowers more abilities than just Death Sweep and Death Sweep and Annihilation. It will now also empower I-Beam, which becomes Abyssal Gaze, Immolation Aura, which becomes Consuming Fire, and Sigil of Flame, which becomes Sigil of Doom. These do 30% more damage than their regular casts, so 30% more damage on our AoE buttons. As well as that, Demon Surge damage is increased by 10% for each time it previously triggered while your demon form is active. And because these are now empowered abilities, that makes it so that Demon Surge procs off of them. Which means instead of just getting Death Sweep and Annihilation like you do when you enter a demonic window and getting 2 Demon Surge pops, pressing Metamorphosis, you'll get 5, because you're going to get it from Annihilation, Death Sweep, Sigil of Doom, Consuming Fire, and lastly, Abyssal Gaze. Pressing I-Beam while you're in meta, though, will not give you more Demon Surges. It just extends the meta and doesn't give you any more Demon Surges, unfortunately. And you can't cancel or a Metamorphosis, so there's no real way to play around that, just as a something down. So, that's everything for both the hero talent trees for Havoc Demon Hunter. I hope that you enjoyed the video, maybe you learned something, and you can leave a comment below if you had any thoughts on the video. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you did like it, or a subscription to my channel if you enjoy my content. Thank you, and have yourself a wonderful day.